Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports, and today we're looking at the British and Irish Lions coaching lineup potentially having been confirmed. We all sort of marked down 6th of May as the big day for the British Irish Lions in terms of the squad being named. Which players do Warren Gatland go with? But also interesting now for sort of the coaches and where does he lie? And I think there are many sort of arguments about the coaches that there are with the players in terms of, are you picking on reputation? Are you picking on form? Are you picking on past proven players and coaches? Because I think what we've seen in the last sort of year is just what not playing rugby does to teams and does to players, and I suppose even to coaches to a certain degree, because they have to try and adapt, and coaches who have been able to adapt the situations of the coaches are sort of thriving. But, when Warren Gatland makes these big decisions, he's got to look at sort of the last 18 months, really. And you think of how well England were doing 2019 World Cup finalists, winning the Six Nations last year, to them plummeting this year and the Six Nations finishing 5th. You look at the steady rise of Scotland. You look at Wales, who seem to be struggling, suddenly back, in with the playing really well. So it's quite an interesting sort of dynamic that Warren Gatland's got to contend with. And I'd be very interested to sort of see what sort of happens there. But Joe, before we look at the coaching lineup that has apparently been confirmed, it's obviously not confirmed officially from the British and Irish Lions themselves. That announcement is supposed to be next week. But there are kind of articles about sort of the coaching staff. And the big news is that there is set to be no England coaches for the first time since 1997. Almost 20 years have gone by with England coaches being part of the British and Irish Lions setup. So if that is to be the case, it will be quite a sort of historic decision to continue not backing the England coach. Now, obviously, we're not going to see the likes of an Eddie Jones. He was someone who was actually a candidate to potentially lead the British Irish Lions instead of Warren Gatland. So now you're sort of always looking sort of the assistants and stuff like that. And the two big names were Matthew Proudfoot and John Mitchell. Now, Matt Proudfoot, for people that don't know, was the South African forwards coach and was sort of, big part of the 2019 World Cup triumph, and played a huge role with the Springboks and getting them back to being sort of where they were. So he was a bit of an outside shot, only because the Lions were going to South Africa, and so they thought, well, he's just gone to England now and working with Eddie Jones and John Mitchell. He knows the Springboks inside and out. He knows how Rassie Erasmus works. He knows how Jacques Nienaber works. He knows the intricacies of South African rugby. And that would have been a huge, huge, huge coup for England, for the British and Irish Lions, if they managed to get him, because he would have had so much insight, so much sort of, in-depth knowledge that I think he would have nullified a lot of what the Springboks might have done. Equally so, John Mitchell is somebody who's been heavily linked with going to the British and Irish Lions as the defence coach. We know that he's, how good he is, and he's been everywhere, but he's also someone that understands the South African setup. He's worked with the Lions, he's worked in South Africa. And I think, those were sort of factors that were started playing a part, Because one thing, obviously, having your best sort of coaches, but you also got to look at who you're playing. What sort of game plan do you want to play? How are these coaches going to prepare the Lions? Because preparing for a Lions tour, it's very different. A Lions tour is very different to preparing for like a World Cup. Because when you're going playing for a World Cup, you are playing for lots of different teams. Whereas a Lions tour, much like when you have sort of inbound and outgoing tours, it's more like it's an inbound tour because you're playing the same opposition 3 times. So your entire sort of setup is focused on these 3 oppositions. But also, if you look at sort of national teams, they're always looking at various different competitions. They play a lot of different opposition. The Lions only play every couple of years, and when they do, they play against one opposition. So the entire Lions tour now is going to be, how can we beat South Africa in 3 matches? Whereas, when you're working with domestic sides or national teams, a lot of it's sort of establishing a very broad or a specific sort of game of rugby, which could be broad amount of teams. How can we establish a style which we can use to beat any other side? Whereas this is literally going to be, we're going to South Africa. How do we beat South Africa? What do we want to play for the players to do and for the coaches to do it? So it looks like apparently Warren Gatland is going with continuity and picking a lot of the coaches he has before. So Gregor Townsend, who is the current coach of Scotland, is expected to continue as attack coach. And to be fair, Scotland on attack did look quite good during the Six Nations, so that kind of makes sense. And then apparently he's also set to Well, so he's going to appoint Gregor Townsend, and he's apparently set to continue with Steve Borthwick as the forwards coach. He is the current head coach of the Leicester Tigers. And then Gatland is going with Graham Roundtree as the scrum coach. He is currently the forwards coach at Munster. And then he is going with Neil Jenkins as the kicking coach. Now, Neil Jenkins is someone who's worked with Warren Gatland quite a lot and is sort of known as a bit of a kicking guru. He's been in lots of different Lions tours, and he's got a lot of experience there. In terms of the French coach, it looks like Warren Gatland is also going to continue with continuity and bring in Ireland head coach Andy Farrell, who will be going on his third straight tour, if that is the case. So, it's very interesting to see sort of the dynamic. And look, there has been quite a lot of continuity with the Lions tour in backing Warren Gatland, so it kind of makes sense to continue with that, to go with coaches who are tried and tested, who have been in the system, and who understand what the sort of Gatland wants to do and what, how the entire sort of the dynamic is. But yeah, so it's quite a sort of an interesting and a tricky thing to try and negotiate. With the Springboks being so big and so brutal, it could have made a lot of sense to bring in John Mitchell. It could have made a lot of sense to bring in Matt Proudfoot to try and give some sort of edge. We're talking about coming to play the world champions. And I don't think they're going to be the world champions that are playing at their best standard, because they just haven't played a lot of rugby together. But they still are the world champions. There's still a lot of world-class players who will be involved for the Springboks. So it is going to be very interesting to see how Lions try and negotiate that. But a very, very big call. And it also sort of begs the question, if Mitchell and Proudfoot are both missing out and they're not backing these coaches in the British and Irish Lions, is it an indication that we might not see as many England players? Could Warren Gatland just sit there and say, how can I select these players who are not playing well, who are not playing a lot of club rugby? All the Saracens players had a bit of a subpar Six Nations. It's not like they're going and playing Premiership. It's not like they're playing in the European Champions Cup. They're not playing top 14 or anything. Whereas a lot of these other players have gone back to the domestic side and are playing in the European Champions Cup at the moment. So they're playing a high standard of rugby in preparation for the Lions tour. They're still keeping their fitness up. They're still, showing some good form and playing against really good players and performing against them. So many small sort of intricacies which really come into play. So let me know what you think of the coaching staff, or what the potential apparent coaching staff is. It is set to be confirmed next week, and the squad is set to be confirmed on the 6th of May. So drop those down in the calendar. But otherwise, we will keep you updated exactly what's happening down on the channel. So make sure you're subscribed. Smash a like on the video as well. As always, thank you very much for watching. My name is Steven, and I'll chat to you soon.